Hi everyone, Maurice saying here. Welcome to Tanks Invest, where we're going to talk about investing, finance, and professional development. For today's video is for entertainment purposes only. The investments they're going to talk about today will be Palantir, ticker PLTR. As you know, across the board for a lot of growth stocks in the last 2 quarters so far, and just the last 3 months specifically, it's been experiencing a lot of sell-off, right? Ever since the new year, we were hitting that all-time peak in Q3, Q4 last year, and subsequently it's just been on downward slope. With respect to just Palantir, it's been down about 35% in the last 3 months so far, and just the last 1 month, it's been down about 11.5%, and today it's been kind of trading sideways on the Monday, April 17th right now. So I'm gonna go through, more of a technical analysis to see more of the psychological perspective, how are investors thinking about this right now, right? Both on the macroeconomical perspective and also the microeconomical perspective, based on the charts that we see in front of us. I'm gonna go through the technical numbers of resistance that we need to look out for if you're interested in buying into the stock for the first time, or dollar cost averaging if you are currently building your position. And also my year-end price target for 2021 as well. So stay tuned, stick around, and let's make some money. Alright, so moving on to the technical analysis for PLTR, you can see that ever since last year in the October timeframe, which is when Palantir was, IPO at around that time period in Q4, it was trading around like the $10, $9 level, which I actually load up significantly around that time period. And ever since then, with all the Wall Street bets, obviously it was a highly anticipated stock to be IPO that subsequently rallied the stock all the way up from the $10 level to the $30 level, which was basically a 300% or 3x of a gains, right? And ever since then, we sold off because of obviously whatever goes up really fast comes down really fast, and it's sold off, but not in the more like a 30% complete up and down, kind of like a pump and dump type of perspective, but more like a institutional buy ownership, and subsequently with retail investors selling, which makes sense, right? But there's obviously a lot of strong institutional ownership that are thinking more of a long-term value perspective, right? So this is more driven by the big candle, which you can see that I believe this is a combination of a lot of big institutions like ARK Invest, JP Morgan, Credit Suisse, and I believe even some of the mutual funds that have actually invested in, even though that's unconventional for something that they would do. So a lot of institutional ownership, a lot of interest, but subsequently sold down. And you can see that ever since it sold down, I believe ARK Invest decide, or one of the large institutions decide to buy in more. It's been kind of trading on a consolidated fashion, right? And then around like the January time frame, which is the beginning of the year, it had that massive pump again because of the, I believe there was a demo day with respect to Palantir, and also there was a lot of positive media affectations that was driving Palantir with respect to a lot of the contracts that is being signed, on the commercial side with a lot of commercialized usage. Traditionally, Palantir used to contract with just more of the government agencies in the US. But as we see more coverage, more exposures, is expanding globally now, to obviously to the municipal side, to the governmental agency side across the world, but more diversification into the commercialized basis as well on both their Gotham and their Foundries value propositions that they have on the product and service side. Which subsequently drove this stock all the way up, contingent obviously on that combinations of the growth pump that we also had in Q1, which we also saw that with a lot of the EV growth stocks. So all of that combinations build up this like euphoric pump on top of the positive media affectations and the anticipations of their earnings call for Q1 that built into the $45 level, right? But ever since then, because of the sector rotations, a lot of hedge funds had to, liquidate to obviously pay for tax. Obviously, there was a lot of window dressing that happened in Q4 last year that they just had to do for the limited partners, the investors. And also because of the, just the inflation scares that we've been getting, from, obviously the governments, right? And obviously with respect to the monetary policies and the inflation scares, and also on top of the latest news that we got from Biden with respect to the tax adjustments for the corporate tax and the capital gains tax, all of that negative media affectations basically on the bipolar spectrum that pushed the stock downward subsequent to that, right? So we drove down from like the $45 level. We've been riding down, and we were kind of floating for, quite some time, for about like 2-3 months now, around like the 22, the low $21 level. And recent time, as of I believe, sometimes after the earnings call, or actually ahead of the earnings call, a couple of days before, people were obviously having more of the negative media affectations from the inflation scares, and obviously the communications that we've been getting from the Federal Reserve, that it pushed down the stock. But you could see that on earnings, it was definitely a good massive green candle day because of the fact that Palantir did really well in their earnings call. It beat Wall Street expectations with respect to a lot of the contract it's been getting, that it pushed up, but because of the more of a macro negative affectation, again, it's pushed it back down. So now it's just kind of consolidating. And also another worrisome thing that we see here, this yellow line right here, is basically the resistance level, or the wall that we haven't breached in in a very long time. And because of the macro negative media affectation, it pushed back down despite the positive earnings. And right now we're kind of consolidating, forming some sort of a scoop at the moment, but this scoop needs to be tested right now. And I think it's still, Wall Street is still deciding, and consumer investors are still deciding which way it should go. But in terms of the chart right now, this is a very interesting, attractive investment opportunity based on how it's set up right now. And if you take a look closely, right, you could see that we hit that bottom of like the $16 to $17 level, which we basically tested based on how it was formed at that top candle, the red candle that you see here, back in November 12th, 2020, that it bounced back up to have the scoop, right? So we have already tested this, and the massive candle shows that there is a lot of institutional interest in this valuation level at the moment. And this was driven by, I think, ARK invested heavily ever since the dip, and I think Kathy and some of the other institutional investors have been pumping a lot of dollars into the stock in recent times, in just the last couple of days and weeks so far, that has propelled it up. So right now, this candle is basically coinciding with this candle right here that we were forming in November or late November. And right now, the risk reward ratio is that I think the upside is really massive from here. You could potentially gain like upwards of like 80% gains from, if we go back to the all-time high. That's the potential that we could get in like the short term, because like Palantir is a stock that is highly pumped, and there's a lot of hype around it. And also because of a lot of institutional interest, this is basically forming a great foundational structure as a basis. On a downward perspective, I think the downside here is really just testing from the $20 level to the $17 level, which is about like a 10%, 12% downward correction from here, which in my opinion, I think if we go down further because of just the, again, more the macro negative media affectation, I think that's a really great price to get in, to build up your position as a long-term perspective, right? And I get a lot of questions from my viewers: should we sell now and rebuy it later at a different price level? That's basically timing the market, right? And I think it's not wise to time the market because there's a lot of exogenous psychological factor that you cannot really predict. But you can only do that by dollars cost averaging, right? By using the numeric systemic level of understanding of averaging out all the risk that you incur, and build up that, and you hope that based on statistics, that your average will be the safest risk profile that you incur as an investment opportunity, that you don't make an irrational decision based on just your emotions, right? Because if you sell now, there isn't really any structural understanding in terms of the logic or any analytical evidentiary support that backs up your rationale why you sell now. But just based on purely human emotions, which makes you feel like you should be selling. But logically, if you think and take a step back and understand the growth potential for the stock going forward, and knowing the fact that as the stock goes down, the risk actually decreases, and that's when when you should incur more positioning into the stock. Not when the stock is all time high that you want to buy and chase the momentum up, right? It should work the other way. So my advice is right now, I think right now is a good time to buy at $20 level. If we go down further to like 17, even better. I don't foresee us to go further down because like the next resistance level at this level right here, this was a pretty strong consolidating sideways trade that we incur for like about a month or so, a half a month or so before the big pump up. So this is a pretty strong base here, and we broke the very, very strong base, and now we have this secondary base. So the base of it, with respect to how much we've sold down already, it's basically like a triple bottom foundation that build upon with great upside potential, very low risk profile that you see here, which subsequently allow you to generate great gains with minimal risk at the moment. So I think long term wise, I definitely see the stock going back up. As the sector rotation comes back, as we learn more about the economical outlooks going forward, and you could see that right here. We have a gap that needs to be filled. So I think the next resistance level that we'll go back to will be somewhere around like the $26 level, 25. And I think we would trade sideways from there and then go back up to this gap right here about like 30. And by the end of this year, I think it wouldn't be not logical for us to go back to like the all-time high at $45 level, knowing the fact that the company has been just killing it on all financial perspective, operational perspective, and business growth on a more of a corporate development perspective as well. All right, so quickly look at tip ranks real quick. You can see that out of the 9 analyst ratings, there are currently 2 buys, 3 holds, and 4 sell. And I think Wall Street still try to decide like what type of stock this is or what type of company this is, knowing the fact that this is such a transformative, unique company with a very differentiated value proposition. Is this a consulting company? Is this a software company? What is this company? It's been contracting with government agencies in the past. Now it's shifting to the commercial side. Is it a commercialized business service company? Like, how should we value this company as a whole? So the valuation is still kind of a up in the air type of assumptions at the moment, which is really the reason why it's driving such a low assumption as a form of a price prediction going forward. But despite all of that negative Wall Street consensus or lack thereof, if you may, it still demands a upside of a 7% if you trade on the average perspective based on their average case. And if we go down, I think the $17 level, it's just, again, right, like I said, that's a really good level for you to buy into as a dollar cost average perspective, knowing the fact that risk reward profile perspective in the ratio understanding spectrum is so high that it demands a great reward, and the level of risk that you incur is so mitigated that I would feel very comfortable buying it at that level and further build out your position from there if you miss out on the IPO ride, at like obviously the $10 to $9 level, right? An all-time high based on Wall Street, $30 as a high level, which I think is a little bit low, to be honest with you. I think we could actually get above that, knowing the fact that we did test 45 already in Q1 earlier this year. That breaching this wouldn't be surprising. And I think by the next earnings call or like the upcoming months, as we have the sector rotation coming and as the economy comes back up, I think we're going to see more like Wall Street revisions of their price targets that will subsequently revise this number upward. And just to take a look at Lucid Trading tracking right here, you could see that Kathy, she's been basically loading up ever since all the dips. You could see on the red days, which we incurred last week. Last week we had such a 4 consecutive weekdays from the 10th all the way to the 13th. I know on the 14th, it was a green day because we have sold off so significantly, right? People had to step up. Hedge funds, have been eyeing these numbers for a while, and that's what they did. And Kathy has been buying ever since, right? And you could see that just last week itself, she put in about 100 mil into the RK fund and RW fund, about like 13 million so far. So definitely a good sign so far. A lot of institutional interest, and Kathy, putting her money where her mouth is. All right, just to recap on all the numbers with respect to Palantir and based on the quantitative analysis that we just did right now, I think right now at the $20-$50 level, that's a really good price point for us to get into if you think about this on a long-term perspective. And if we have another correction, which, again, the correction will be relatively minimal based on the fact that we have sold off so significantly already. Down again, right? 35% in the last 3 months, 11% in just 1 month. And today is kind of like a sideways day, and last week was such a terrible week, selling off significantly already. And you saw that Kathy bought in a lot around like the 18, 15, $17 level. That would be a very attractive price point for you to get into if you think about building this, and further dollar cost average to build your position up while having a lower cost average. And I think if we even have a more of a black swan event at the $17 level, I think that will be pretty drastic for it to do that. It would require a lot of institutional seller. It would require just a very negative media affectations for us to get down there to the $17 level, and that level was basically incurred back in November, December last year, which is a relatively low level for us to get back down to. And if we do, I will be right there with my purchase order. I will be right there loading up with a shovel and a bucket. And my year-end price target, I think $50 level, based on just the rotations that we'll be seeing and how the business is progressing so far. $50 in the next 7 to 8 months from here wouldn't be surprising to me. I think long term wise, in the next 24 months, Palantir being a stock that's up to like about $95 to $100 wouldn't be surprising to me, to be honest. I think that's a relatively fair valuation for the company of this potential, and how industry agnostic and how limited that the business value proposition that it can provide for companies and corporations and municipality as well, which is just enormous market cap potential for it to be up for grab. And I think the technological capability is truly unmatched. They're second to none in terms of what they do, and that's why it's so differentiated, and that's why it's so unique as a business, and that's why I'm such a big bullish investor into the stock. All right, so that's it for today for PLTR Palantir on my technical analysis and some of the insights research that I've done so far. Hopefully you guys find this helpful. Please subscribe, hit the like button, also hit the bell notification to watch out for my next video. Really appreciate it again, and really love the support. I really appreciate it. It really excites me every single day to see the interactions and engagements that I'm getting from people, and people actually finding this to be helpful. Please stay tuned for the next video. Thanks so much.